Korece kanalından konferansı Türkçe olarak dinleyebilirsiniz. İngilizce dinlemek isterseniz veya iki dili de anlıyorsanız off seçeneğinde tutabilirsiniz butonu. So we have simultaneous translation available throughout the conference. If you want to listen to the speakers in English only, you can choose the language on the interpretation button, the world icon, that is on the lower right corner. If you'd like to listen to the speakers in Turkish, please pick Korean and turn it off if you understand both languages. And let me take this opportunity to thank our wonderful team of interpreters, Bahar Eriş, Ceren Bektaş, and Narin Koray Saka. The conference is being video recorded, and it's also live streamed on YouTube now. Your cameras have already been stopped to prevent overloading the internet. If you wish, you can also change your names. The microphones are off. We will turn them on when needed. And please write your questions and comments on the chat box. So, Gearing Roles is a 4-year project funded by the European Commission in the scope of Science with and for Society framework, where 6 gender action plans are designed and implemented in various European institutions, including Sabancı University. We have officially kicked off this project in the beginning of 2019, and since then, during both the institutional assessment process and designing of our gender action plan, on many occasions, we felt we were supported and appreciated for facilitating this work at Sabancı, together with all actors at the university. The higher management was one of those actors who generously supported us by allocating time to attend the meetings, focus groups, co-creation workshops, and also by putting in so much input and ideas. Vice Rector for Institutional Affairs and Social Impact at Sabancı University, Fuat Keyman, was one of these allies, and whose contributions felt eye-opening and empowering. Here are leaders from other Gearing Roles partners institutions as well, who shouldered the collective work for gender equality in their respective institutions, from whom we are looking forward to hear what this work meant to them in terms of institutional challenges and resistances. And I would like to thank Inge Bleijenbergh, who kindly accepted our invitation to moderate this session. Inge Bleijenbergh is an associate professor at the Institute for Management Research at Radboud University, Netherlands. She's an expert in research methods and in gender and diversity, and conducts participatory action research on gender equality in organizations. She's one of the editors of the Oxford Handbook of Diversity in Organizations and associate editor of Gender, Work and Organization. She was principal investigator in EU-funded projects such as STAGES and EGERA, and published in peer-reviewed journals like Journal of Management, Organization Studies, Organization, Gender, Work and Organization, and Social Politics. Floor is yours, Inge.
Thank you for the kind introduction, Leire. I'm very honored to be asked to chair this session, and I'm also thrilled by the presence of leaders of all the gender equality plan implementing partners of the Gearing Roles project. During my participation in the former EU projects, STAGES and EGERA, I became fascinated by the role of change agents in organizations. I learned while we are conducting structural change and we have to adapt the structures of organizations to transform them, we need the involvement of key change agents. And that may be feminist researchers, as we call them in the Netherlands, that may be the scholars that lead the projects, but very important are also the leaders in the organizations, their commitment, their willingness to take an extra step. And in one of my recent research projects, I'm interviewing change agents. I started with interviewing male change agents in organizations because I wanted to understand how they became motivated to be involved in this transformation process. And later on, I also interviewed female change agents. And I'm thrilled that we have this audience and this panel of leaders in the institutions that implement gender equality plans as part of the Gearing Roles project. I would like to introduce the leaders one by one now, and then ask them to tell us, as the audience, a little bit more about how they became involved in the issue of gender equality, what it meant to them, and what difficulties they entered addressing the issue. And before we hear from them about that, we will also listen to the researchers from the Deusto team that sketch an institutional context within which these leaders are working. So in our panel, we have, and I'll introduce them one by one. First of all, we have present Simonetta Manfredi. She is Associate Dean of Research and Knowledge Exchange and Professor of Equality and Diversity at Oxford Brookes, at the Business School of Oxford Brookes University in the United Kingdom. Welcome, Simonetta. We also have here Karin Jaanson of the Estonian Research Council. She is Executive Director there, and so an important leader from Estonia. Welcome, Karin Jaanson. We have Fuat Keyman, full professor of international relations at Sabancı University, our host institution. He's vice president of the university and responsible for institutional affairs and social impact. Welcome, Professor Keyman. We have here Eduardo Ruiz, and he is professor at the University of Deusto in Bilbao and vice rector for the university strategy. Welcome, Eduardo. So good to have you here. We have Roman Kuhar, a full professor of sociology at the Faculty of Arts of the University of Ljubljana in Slovenia and dean of the Faculty of Arts. Roman, welcome.
Good morning.
We have here Mário Vale, full professor at the Institute of Geography and Spatial Planning, IGOT, at the University of Lisbon in Portugal. Good to have you here. Welcome.
Good morning.
And then we have here the two researchers from the Deusto team, Leire Gartzia Fernandez, who is professor of leadership and change management at Deusto Business School of the University of Deusto in Bilbao, Spain. Welcome, Leire. Good to see you again. And we have here John Pizarro Perez, who is a PhD candidate at Deusto Business School at the University of Deusto in Bilbao, Spain. And I think, Leire and John, I'll give the floor to you first to sketch the institutional context within which these leaders are working, are acting. And after that, we will continue with discussing with them their personal involvement and challenges.
Okay, so thank you. Maybe I will share my screen and share the presentation we have. Okay, so here we are, and it's really exciting to be all together and have an opportunity to share our work package 5, which is about leadership and the actions that we are implementing around leadership. And hopefully we have some interesting discussions with our leaders afterwards. So before we start, I just wanted to remind that we are talking about gender equality actions that want to transform gender roles in our organizations at 3 different levels, as we introduced yesterday. So we have the micro, the meso, and the macro levels. This means that we have to promote changes at the level of individual dispositions, at the group level where people interact with each other, and at the level of the organizational structure, changing culture and the broader dynamics in organizations. This is an important challenge, and this is somehow taking as the background that we have to promote institutional change. That's what we are talking about that all the time. And yesterday we mentioned this. We have to fix the system. We have to change the whole system, the institution, so that we can produce changes, the changes that we want. Now the question is, how can we do this? And to answer that question, we know that for sure we need leaders, because leaders are part of that change. They are operating at all these different levels of institutional change, at the individual level, because they have their own attitudes, their own expectations, and at the organizational level, because they make important decisions in organizations. So in this work package, what we try is to produce changes at this level of the people who are making decisions in organizations. And something else that I want to remember and underscore here is that it's not only that these people are, but also that people in leadership positions are unfortunately still very much influenced by this bias that we still have, that we well, somehow have developed over the years, which is consistent with a think manager, think male paradigm, where people in leadership styles think that, you know, we have to be more agentic, competitive, assertive, ambitious to be effective as leaders, and that's in line with a stereotypically masculine way of leading. Okay, so that's a fact, that's a reality we know from research, and that's also part of the problem, and that's what we want to deal with. And just another brief reminder that the role of managers is also especially important in implementing gender equality plans, because they have to provide public support, ensure that the practical implementation of measures take place, promote all these incentives, and, you know, instruct the relevant people to go on with these actions. So what we are doing in this work package that Job will explain in a minute is basically encourage equal representation of men and women in leadership, analyze and redefine leadership models from a gender perspective. This is basically looking at how we can redefine styles in a broader way, and also support awareness, looking at all these individual dispositions that we mentioned before. Okay, so we want to change individual behavior and attitudes. And how are we doing this? Well, basically, we are trying to, look at previous experiences and provide inspiration from this with best practices, and we have some reports that we are developing with this. We are exchanging knowledge and experience among all these implementers, the institutions. So we had several trainings with our leaders. And also we have, gender awareness training actions that are broader and open to more people beyond not only our leaders. And for example, we have Fiona McKay very recently talking about feminist leadership. Okay, so with this framework, we basically have an evaluation that we are trying to see where we are in relation to all these issues and where we want to go, and that's what John will explain now. So we basically have some organizational indicators where we look at what's the starting point, where are we in relation to our management bodies, where are women and men leaders, what's the picture. Then with a qualitative approach, we were having interviews with our leaders and getting to some conclusions. And we are also running a survey. We are collecting data with a quantitative approach with leaders and team members. But now John will focus on these two first parts, which are the ones that are already developed.
Okay, thank you, Leire. Now, as you said, I will focus on the analysis that we have already conducted in order to set the initial scene of our institutions. As Leire said, we started by collecting some basic indicators of our management bodies concerning leadership. In this sense, all of the partners started the analysis by gathering some basic indicators about what the situation of these management bodies is. Here, as we can see, a snapshot of all the of the shares of the composition of the management bodies at different institutions of the gearing roles, and we can see how the vast majority of them, with some exceptions, are highly masculinized. Once we have stated this reality, all of the partners of the institutions wanted to go deeper into this analysis, and in this sense, we conducted some qualitative analysis with interviews with the different members of the governing bodies at different institutions. When analyzing these qualitative interviews, several topics appear as common to all the partners of the institutions of the gearing roles. In this sense, we have 3 different main topics that we are going to tackle here, and then we will leave them open to discussion among them. The first one is the obstacles in the access to management positions. In this sense, all of the partners state, or the vast majority of partners stated by showing us what is called an equality mirage, what has to do with the sense that everything that equality has been already achieved, or is natural, or is going to be achieved in a natural sense. Or it's going to be assessed achieved in the future without any further action. Also, what we can see from the discourses of the leaders of organizations is this tension between meritocracy and gender equality or gender perspective when accessing management positions. This is one of the most highly debated topic, because of them, or of the majority of the discourses shows us how there is a tension between them, how to be more gender balanced without giving or without being less valuing the merit of the people. In this sense, in order to access also to management positions, the majority of the leaders recognize how the incidence of the culture and the inertia of the institutional practices in a broader range, the informal practices of the institutions play a great role in trying to change. I think that, as in all structural change processes, the incidence of the culture plays a great importance. Sorry. And one interesting point that was also addressed by all the interviews, and was also present yesterday in our discussions with the sister projects, and also with the members of the civil society, is the difficulty of balancing work and private life, and the special difficulties that these leadership positions states for all of them. In this sense, we discussed yesterday that these leadership positions puts a great expectations of high working hours and high effort on people that maybe they can fight with this difficulty of balancing work and private life, and they prevent them to accept these positions. And finally, we also saw how in some context, maybe women have a disaffection to leadership roles, in particular because this inertia, this traditional process or way of working has make them ask whether they are good candidates or not. in order to get into these positions. This is also called the imposter syndrome, by which they do not believe they can perform well in these positions, and prevent them to accept that positions. Another topic that was tackled in nearly all the interviews and that we want to analyze is the measures, is the adoption by institutions of measures to improve the gender balance of the management bodies. In this sense, there is a common understanding or common resistance to affirmative measures, in particular to quotas, because we have said before about the quality mirage and this conviction that gender equality will be achieved in the future without broader measures because of the natural process of going to this equality, of converging to equality. And in nearly all institutions, there is a high resistance to affirmative measures, to these quotas, in particular because also it seems they are seen as targeting to this meritocracy versus gender equality tension. In this same sense, mentoring and role models are more widely accepted measures as they are seen as measures not so directly targeting to the decision process of involving more people in the management bodies or to increasing these shares, but to boosting the personal abilities and the personal affection to achieve these roles. In this sense, there is a particular quite interesting quotation in our interviews, that is that you can see what you cannot see. You cannot be what you cannot see. Sorry, that I think that gives us the perfect framework for this last topic. And the last area in which some of the partners get into in their interviews is the leadership styles and gender. In particular, nearly most of the partners show how there is a different style, a masculine style of leader, of being a leader, and a feminine style. Being the masculine style more task-oriented and dynamic than the feminine style, which is characterized by the empathy and by the care, and the patience and care. Sometimes they also identify the more stereotypically masculine traits with the leader's style. This is a point that it has been tackled in some interviews, and we want to go deeper into it. Which so in the questionnaire Leire told we are performing right now, we have included some further questions which will allow us to analyze this leadership styles area in a broader sense, in a more detailed sense. So from this analysis, we learned that there are still high resistances to gender equality actions in the leadership field, mainly because this meritocracy versus gender equality perspective tension, and also that the importance of the cultural background and inertia on the redefinition of the workload of leaders will play a great role in the changing process towards a more gender inclusive leadership and decision making bodies. Finally, as some conclusions of our analysis and of the different activities of the work packages in general, is that of the work package 5 in a broader sense, is that we need in order to achieve an equal representation of leaders, we need to identify resistances and levels of resistance, which somehow we have done with this analysis, in which we're trying to set the scene of our resistances before working with them, and set some organizational objectives which will link us to, or which will boost the institution and the current leaders to act in this way, in this direction. Then, in order to redefine leadership, we need to work with organizational behavior approaches to cultural change, and link this this initial situation in order to move to the new one, to improved one, with a strategy or with organizational goals in order to be more easier to move to it. And finally, to raise awareness. It's necessary to in all of the change processes in order to get people involved and to move forward, to raise individual awareness and to set a top-down or a bottom-up strategy, either one or the other, or a combination of both ones, and to identify all the unconscious bias that will also play a great role in our process of change. And in this sense, we have tried to give you an overview of all of the different all of these different aspects towards our gap analysis, and also we're going to get more deeper into it with the analysis we are performing right now with the different instruments. So I think this is all. Thank you, and Inge, the floor is yours to start the discussion.
Yeah, thank you very much, John Pizarro Perez, and thank you very much, Leire Gartzia Fernandez, for sketching out the context, the institutional context of our partners and the different challenges in structural transformation. Now we've sketched the context, and now it's becoming about the persons and their personal involvement in this issue. So I would like to start with Simonetta Manfredi and ask her, how have you personally become involved in the issue of gender equality?
First of all, thank you very much indeed for inviting me. I'm really very pleased, delighted to be involved in this discussion. How did I become involved? Well, I'm a researcher on equality and diversity management issues. So I started in my career researching these issues, but also I'm very much driven by an interest in seeing how not just doing the research and find out about the problems, but I'm very keen on solutions as well. So I've always conducted my research, I've always taken more of an actual research type of approach. And one of the best places where you can start experimenting with solutions, of course, is your own institution. So I started to become, throughout my career, I've been at Brookes for a long time, Oxford Brookes a long time. Throughout my career, I started also to get involved in various committees, the places where decisions are made, and that's what I would recommend, identify where the places where decisions are made, where I could bring some of my knowledge that I have acquired through my research and indeed through the research of other colleagues as well, to these committees and other working groups to try to promote change within the institution. So that's how I became involved in this. And gradually, as my career progressed and I had more and more access to various decision-making places, I saw myself very much as an agent of change. I then was able to even more contribute to the progressing gender equality issue in the institution. And I have been through, it's been really interesting, as I say, because I had a long career, have been through the different stages. And I've seen how, you talk about the challenges. Don't know whether you want me to go into that right now or yeah, talk about the challenges. And I have lived through the days when some of the challenges were actually direct discrimination, where, I remember a case where I was on a research committee, a colleague had been given a sabbatical, but she was about to go on maternity leave. So this sabbatical was going to be withdrawn from her because she was going on maternity leave, and having to argue, well, once she comes back from maternity leave, she should still be entitled to her sabbatical. And I remember the argument then was my male colleagues, I was the only woman on that committee at the time, my male colleagues arguing, but we have to be fair and we have to treat her as, if an ill man if a man was ill and had a sabbatical, we would withdraw that sabbatical, then we have to treat her in the same way. And I had to point out, no, pregnancy is not an illness, so on and so forth. So that was a clear example of direct discrimination. And then as we moved on, I think what the biggest challenges became, so we moved from I'm pleased to say that there has been a lot of progress made, but then the biggest challenges are what I would call the invisible barriers, the second generation discrimination. The second generation of discrimination, in a nutshell, is what all those interactions, practices, policies, which appears to be gender neutral, but they are not. And I think in the presentation that we just heard, the presentation has touched on some of the points that I wanted to highlight in the challenges. So this is the biggest one, I think, and is still there to a certain extent, to make people see that something that they see is gender neutral. It isn't. And let me give you an example. And again, I've seen the evolution of this, which relates to the work-life balance issue. Women are still predominantly primary carers, although men too are getting more and more involved in caring responsibilities, so that needs to be acknowledged. Therefore, their time, we know as researchers, often we do research outside our working hours, there is a lot of an assumption that you're so passionate about your research, you don't want to do anything else but doing that. But actually, we have other things in our life. So women might not have as much time, especially when there are childcare responsibilities or other caring responsibilities, to devote to do research. So the quantity of their outputs, research outputs, may not be as much as the quantity of someone who hasn't got that kind of demands on their time. And an expectation that people should have so many papers or having achieved so much in their career, a particular point of their career, without thinking that individual productivity needs to be put within the context. So if people are going through phases of their life where there are other significant demands on their time that come from caring responsibilities, or it could be other things like having a disability, etc., taking that into account and focusing on the quality rather than the quantity. Now, this has been quite a big issue which has gone on over time. And I'm glad to say that now in the UK, because of legislative changes, this has been now put on the agenda. And although not everybody has bought into it completely, nonetheless, there is now more attention to let's focus on quality of what people have done rather than the quantity. So this is one of those invisible barriers where you say, well, we treat everybody equally. We expect everybody to become a professor, I don't know, to have 150 papers, let's say, for the sake of argument. We apply that criteria equally to men and women. What's wrong with that? And yeah, that criteria is not thinking about how you need to contextualize. So that is an example. And the other one is, the colleagues in the presentation have mentioned it, the meritocracy versus gender. And that when you try to change things and people use that argument, they shut any conversation down because they say, but we only apply on merit. We only go by merit. And I don't doubt their good faith, but then we need to open a conversation. What do you mean by merit? Merit is a construct, is not something that exists out there in the abstract. We give content to that merit in terms of what do we value, what do we rate, and it goes back to the example that I gave you before. If we value quantity over quality, then we construct the merit in a particular way. So we need to have really a very serious conversation about what we mean by that. Because otherwise we're not going to progress, because people will tell you, oh, but we got all these criteria, we apply them equally to men and women, But you need to look at those criteria, first of all. Are those criteria gendered? That is the key. Which also then takes me to, the colleagues have raised the point about the quotas. I don't think we should talk about quotas because quotas, well, first of all, let me say that yes, I'm in favor of quotas myself, but quotas are not permitted under EU legislation. And if you talk about quotas, you put people off immediately. What we should talk instead about seriously is positive action, which is permitted under the EU legislation, whereby in a tie-break situation, either in recruitment or promotion, you could give preferential treatment to the candidate from the underrepresented group, if they are of equal merit. Now, this is something that is quite close to my heart, this debate. I've written a paper which is called Who is Afraid of Positive Action? And in that paper, I don't want to take too much time. And Inge, please signal to me if I'm talking for too long, because I need to, I'm quite passionate about this thing, so I can get carried away.
Yeah, and you will have more time to talk about your plan.
Right. Because what I think this idea that this preferential treatment is actually unfair, it's reverse discrimination, I have challenged that. I would challenge that in many ways, because we need to start from the point that men so far had a lot of preferential treatment. A lot of things, you know, they usually, there is plenty of research which shows that men and women are judged differently. Then some of these policies and practices are modeled on a much more type of masculine culture. So you could argue it's not preferential treatment. We are rebalancing here because men had it so good for so long. So they had the preferential treatment.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Simonetta, you became involved in as a change agent in your organization by experimenting with change, participating in committees. You face direct discrimination of colleagues and try to address that. But more important and more difficult to address is invisible discrimination, where people think it's gender neutral, but you have to make them see it is not.
That's right.
And and what you think is that we need to talk about what is merit, exactly how do we measure that, and how can we use positive action as a way to change organizations. Thank you very much. Let's move now to Karin Jaanson from the Estonian Research Council, the executive director. Karin, can you tell us how you became involved in this issue of gender equality?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm very pleased that I'm able to talk about our organization and about myself. Actually, I have been on managing position for more than 20 years, and consciously maybe dealing with gender equality issues, I only started to think when I started to work at the Estonian Research Council, where I work for 5 years for now. And our organization is a government foundation, and we are more like administrative organization. And therefore, our organization is quite different compared to our universities, where you see the gender equality problems. But in our case, it's opposite. We have about 60 employees, and among them 80% are women and 20 are men. And if we look at the management position, on top level we have 1 man and 1 woman, me, and then out of 6 department heads we have only 1 man. But it doesn't mean that there are any obstacles for men that they couldn't apply for position, or we don't want to have more equal situation. But in our case, I consciously came across a gender issue when about 4 years ago, 1 female researcher who had 3 children spoke to me that our startup grant, which is a grant aimed to supporting the researchers with initial research experience to launch their independent research career at the Estonian Research and Development Institution, has an age limit 40 years, which is actually obstacle, because if you have 3 children and you have been on maternity leave, you are maybe not ready to start with a startup grant. So we immediately changed the rules and removed the age restriction, and removing the obstacles to gender equality that are inherent in the research system itself is very important. And this was just 5 years ago, and this example shows that sometimes we do not even notice how we have created the environment that does not provide equal opportunities for everyone. To make issues like this more visible both to us well as to the larger public, we are now always trying to collect sex disaggregated data where possible, and also publishing this online to raise awareness about gender differences both inside and outside of our organization. And the greatest challenge what we have is actually that if we look at the Estonian research system, we see that it hasn't reached the equality of men and women in terms of their positions and opportunities. The percentage of female PhD graduates amounted 54% in 2019. But the share of women among the highest academic positions among professors in Estonia is 24%. So here we see really great imbalance. And being a research funding organization, our particular challenge is to improve gender balance among the members of our grant proposal evaluation panels, committees, and among the reviewers. But this is quite difficult, because if the imbalance exists in research system, we import the gender biases to our structures. And there exists a great gender imbalance across academic positions. The proportion of women in the decision-making bodies regarding to research policies models, and considerably more men apply for and receive research grants than women. So the gender problems in our research system also reflected in our decision-making bodies. And we see that in the highest Research and Development Council, who gives advice to our Prime Minister, only 13% are women. And Research Policy Committee, who gives advice to the Minister of Education and Research, 16%. Also very important is our evaluation committee, and now we have reached the 35% because we really said that if we have equal candidates, in this case we will take to the committee the person who is underrepresented sex.
Thank you very much, Karin Jaanson. With long experience in administrative positions and working at the Estonian Research Council as an administrative organization opposed to the research institutions that are the other partners, you face different issues. Within the organization, women are well represented, but the landscape in Estonia regarding decision-making bodies that decide about research policy or research funding, there are still challenges are met. You were referring, for example, to the age limit that is there of 40 years. And for example, women that interrupted their careers for some time to get children will have issues meeting, will be beyond that age limit while they are talented and still want to get grants. One of the solutions you present is data collection on sex, so sex segregated data to show and to follow, to scrutinize how the representation is of different age cohorts within the funding, the people that get funding, and within the decision-making bodies. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, then I would like to give the floor to Fuat Keyman from Sabancı University to tell us how he became involved in the issue of gender equality.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted and very happy to be in this conference and panel and involved in this project as the Vice President of Sabancı University. Personally, I got involved in the question or issue of gender equality when I was finishing up my PhD in Canada and postdoc in Boston. And at that time, I was working on international relations theory. We call it IR theory. There, I learned a lot from the discussions about gendering international relations. And those days, with my age, I'm talking about sort of 90s, beginning of 90s. I was very privileged to work with scholars like Anne Tickner from MIT and Christian Sylvester, and they actually wrote amazing books on international relations, and there was a debate about whether we should call it gender and international relations or gender in international relations. And this actually was the end's idea. And so that actually was very eye-opening for me, and I learned a lot from these books. But at the same time, when I was writing my book on critical international relations theory, I learned a lot from post-colonial international relations theory. At that time, there was the first move to actually think about international relations, globalization from the lenses of post-coloniality, like sort of scholars like Spivak and the others. And so I got to learn about jeopardy issue, jeopardy, gender inequality, double jeopardy if you are black, triple jeopardy if you are black and Muslim or black Muslim and worker. So in this sense, from my personal point of view, I learned a lot in my academic career, a lot from discussions in and about gender, and from my women friends, and also got involved in the Framework 7 European project on European enacting European citizenship, in which I was the director of Turkey. I was working with civil society organizations in Turkey, and at that time I got interested in conscientious objection issue, and in that not only gender but also like this LGBT and the other issues, and how complex and complicated these issues are. Of course, the more complicated they are, the more enlightening and eye-opening they have become. So in this sense, I learned from them. So that's what actually my first point. And second point is, from my time working in Canada, then in the United States, Boston, then back to Turkey, I always pay attention to pushing this question of gender equality, making institutions more inclusive in that sense. And we work hard on in Sabancı University, for instance, for establishing gender equality, but not only establishment, but the important thing actually is, as this research and this project indicates, how to implement it and how to internalize it. And so we have some still challenges in terms of the implementation and internalization of gender equality. But Sabancı University took a decision to have gender equality as one of its identities or brand names. We are very proud of talking about our university as an institution that pays scant attention to gender equality. And as a matter of fact, one of the characteristics of Sabancı University, it's a smaller university, but very prestigious and very productive university. We actually grow the university with centers. We pay attention to the relationship between the faculties and centers and to enhance interactions between them. And one of our very strong and productive and successful centers actually is Sabancı University Gender Center. We call it SuGender, and they do marvelous work, and they contribute a lot to our university. So in this sense, I might actually admit that I've been lucky in a way, because I work in institutions where this issue is, taken seriously to begin with and discussed. So we still work on how to actually implement, how to, sort of internalize these things in Sabancı University. And that are the challenges, actually. And even, this sort of the people like me, like from a man position, that like we actually pay attention. But as the previous speaker said, even the very discussion about merit, discussions about meritocracy, about sort of gender equality. So these are actually constructs. I agree, and we have to work on it. But I think it is a work. It is actually something that we should work on it, and the more we work on it, the more success actually comes. And finally, of course, talking about gender equality in Sabancı University is one thing, but talking about gender equality in Turkish universities, is another thing. And as a matter of fact, as a vice president, I am part of university's representation in higher education council. We have actually a very sort of umbrella, regulatory body in Turkey dealing with, or impact actually authoritarian way, sort of regulating universities. And, in terms of COVID-19 situations, we establish app groups and everything among the presidents and vice presidents. Amazingly man-oriented, like for instance, in our university, there is 50-50 proportion, but when it comes to Turkish universities, actually this actual thing actually among the rectors, vice rectors, directors, deans, 80-85% at least men. So in this sense, actually, Sabancı University might be a best practice that might actually start the process for thinking about this issue in a larger, broader national context. There we face amazing challenges from the beginning. It is very masculine. It is very patriarchal. It is very man-oriented. So in this sense, I finish by making a distinction between, certain universities that are okay in terms of, how to actually implement and internalize gender equality, like Sabancı University. That might be bad practice, but I think, we should also think about this in a very general, broader national context. There, a big work, is in front of us, universities. But I know that, the success comes, and the more we work on these things, the more windows, are going to be opened, and we're gonna actually push this. For that, starting with SuGender, I actually congratulate and thank you all of actually participants in this project. It is a very important project. I believe in inclusiveness. I believe in deliberation, and I believe in actually discussing these issues in a very actually deliberative and inclusive way. That's what we try to do in Sabancı University. Of course, success rate is not satisfactory. We got to work on this more. But nevertheless, I think with this kind of projects, with this kind of efforts, starting with the institutions like SuGender and people working actually in it, we will actually go step by step to implement and internalize it.
Thank you very much. That is an impressive story. You consider gender equality a work. We have to work on it together. And you applaud the colleagues within the university that bring in the expertise. And when you explain how you became involved in the issue, it was already early in your career, working in Canada and the United States in gender and in international relations. You also learned about post-colonial theories, and from your participation in European-funded 7 framework projects, where you learned to work with LGBT organizations. So quite a broad influence. And you're proud that gender and inclusion is part of the identity and the brand name of your university.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we move to the next leader, and that is Eduardo Ruiz Vietes, who is Vice Rector for the University Strategy in University of Deusto in Bilbao. And how did you become involved in the issue of gender equality?
Good morning, everybody. First of all, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to participate in this table. And also thank you very much to the participants in the project for the work you are developing in our institutions. I would mention two different ways or two parallel tracks for getting involved. On the one hand, more personal, I have been working on minority rights for many years. So that's one of my main fields of research and interest. I focus on national minorities, religious minorities, linguistic minorities, particularly in the European region. And I'm not an expert on gender issues, but yes, I can consider myself to know a little bit about minority rights. And I think we share what I call the minority approach. Obviously, there are some substantial differences in dynamics about gender relations and minority-majority relations, but still, I think we have something in common, which is a minority approach, and I can feel myself quite sympathetic to the topic. On the other hand, I think there is also an institutional way or institutional track. I've been working for many years in the Human Rights Institute. I was the director of this institute for many years, and I have always had colleagues working very much focused on gender issues, gender equality. And for instance, we decided already in 2003, which is some time back, to conduct a survey or an analysis of ourselves, the Institute, through the gender perspective. So we started learning from that interesting experience, which also provoked some difficulties in that moment. So I think this also the whole institution, the context has been changing, evolving. The whole institution is committed to this topic. So I think that also pushes or helps in getting involved, particularly if you are in a responsibility like in the executive board of the university, etc. Then I have had to reflect about the concrete challenges. Well, I would mention the big challenge is obviously to move from the discourse, from the politically correct discourse, to real practice and to everyday work, and particularly when we have to take decisions. So how to permeate all this discourse, all these big projects, the strategic plan and the strategic lines in the big plans, when we at the directive levels, we have to take particular and concrete decisions, which obviously affect or can be affected also by this perspective. So that's obviously the big challenge. It's more abstract, but I think it's very important to realize about this also second generation discrimination, which has already been mentioned, because there is a big sector of the institution, and I guess that happens also in other European institutions, who consider that the gender equality issue is already over because we have already included in the strategic plan and etc. So we are all aware about the importance of this. So how to permit it into concrete decisions. And particularly, I could also mention that 1 year ago, we were drafting a strategic plan for the Faculty of Social and Human Sciences, because at that moment I was acting as dean of that faculty. And well, that was also a particular challenge, how to include or what was the best way to include, to make it visible and practical, the gender perspective into that strategic plan. Was it, obviously it had to be like a transversal line for the plan, but also was it necessary to include a specific measure, and if any, in which of the lines and what kind of measure. We finally included one of the indicators specifically referred to this, but also some more transversal discourses along the plan. That was also another point of another concrete challenge that I had to face, or we had to face and debate 1 year ago. And finally, I think there was another question about what helped us to address this kind of decisions. Well, I think in our case, the ideology or the spirit of the university, the discourse of the university helps, in the sense that it is a university committed to social justice. As I said before, I've been working in the Human Rights Institute for many years. So there is a Human Rights Institute. There is an institute also about applied ethics. There are different labels and initiatives to promote social impact of the research and of the teaching. So there is a number of initiatives in favor of a social approach, which I think favors let's say the atmosphere to deal with these issues. And also, I think that it helps. We are not such a big university. I think that the size of the university sometimes can be something good for dealing with these kind of transversal policies. I think we are more familiar than other universities in the environment, and that makes it more possible to discuss, to debate, and maybe hopefully to implement this.
Thank you very much, Eduardo. So you sketched us that there were two ways in which you became involved in gender equality. One was your research, your own research in minority rights, in European minority rights. And the other was learning about your own institution while you were conducting, while you were investigating it. And the main challenge that you sketch us is departing from the political discourse that gender equality is already there, and still showing, especially this indirect discrimination is still going on. And you had to face this challenge when you want to include the gender dimension in a strategic plan last year. But what helps you then is the ideology of the university, where social justice is an important value, and that helps you to address this issue. Yeah, thank you very much. We move to the next speaker, and that is Roman Kuhar. Roman, can you tell us how you became involved with the issue of gender equality?
Good morning, greetings from a lockdown in Slovenia. The picture behind me is the Faculty of Arts, but it's fake. I'm sitting in my living room, so that's not as spectacular as it might look on the Zoom conference. My way to gender equality is also a combination of professional and private interests or backgrounds. As a student of sociology, I was quickly introduced to gender theory, and I guess that's one way how I became, well, interested, but also aware of these issues. I would say that all of my academic mentors were feminist scholars. So I was raised academically by feminist scholars, and I was also participating in numerous EU projects dealing with gender equality, most notably Queen, which was headed by Mike Verlo, who is among us. Hi, Mike. That was a very good learning experience, a very tough one, I might say. It was a huge project and a lot of work. but a very rewarding one, of course. Personally, I am the first openly gay dean at the Faculty of Arts. And for that reason, of course, these issues of equality, anti-discrimination, legislation and stuff like that is close to my heart, of course. So I think these are two reasons or two ways how I became interested in gender equality. In terms of challenges that we have faced at the Faculty of Arts during my time as a dean, I come from the institution which is the oldest and the largest educational institution in humanities and social sciences in Slovenia. And we were 100 years old last year. And among 50 and something deans that were in the position at the Faculty of Arts during these 100 years, there were only 3 female deans. And that was quite shocking to learn. And even more shocking to learn was that my team of vice deans is the first one who has more female deans than male deans. On the other hand, among employees, the number of female employees is, I think, over 60% compared to male employees. So these are the framework within which we are working at the Faculty of Arts. On the other hand, the Faculty of Arts was also the first one in Slovenia to introduce feminist theory and gender studies in the mid-90s. So that helped during this process of adopting gender equality plan, which we adopted this year. But of course, there were also voices of opposition, and these voices were partly connected to what we see globally, and that is the anti-gender movement, let's call it that way, which is widely spread and can mean a lot of things, but part of this anti-gender movement is also an organized attack on gender studies, on gender departments, on denouncing research in gender studies as non-scientific, as ideological and so forth. And I was shocked to learn that this in some ways resonates also within the university or the faculty, not as directly as you see on the ground outside of the university, as you see among these protests which are organized across Europe and beyond, but still. So I think this is one of the challenges that we have to face and address. And this opposition is not very concrete, is not very direct. And I think it's much harder to tackle it for that reason. So I think this is one of the challenges. And another one that we faced during our process of adopting gender equality plan at the Faculty of Arts is the language issue. First of all, how to translate gender equality into our national language. I don't know if this is an issue for other partners in this project. Of course, for us, it's easy to speak in English and we know what we mean by gender equality, but as soon as you translate it into your national language, this equality can be understood as sameness, gender sameness, not gender equality. I don't know if it makes sense in English, it's hard to translate back. But it was hard to explain that gender equality is not only equal opportunities, or it's not even only legal equality, because that's usually the argument that we have this equality legally already reached. But as Simonetta was saying, I mean, one thing is the legal norm, the other thing is how we interpret these norms and what is the content of these norms. So I think this is one of the challenges that we faced, and somehow we try to explain what we mean by gender equality, but there are still a lot of opposition in that terms. The Faculty of Arts is, a large part of our faculty is dealing with language, is dealing with Slovenian language. So our intervention, as you might have heard, we have adopted a rule that we use female pronouns as neutral instead of male pronouns, which is radical, I admit. It's not very usual, but there was a good reason to adopt that. And that was a huge scandal and really exploded. But it opened up the space, a lot of discussions, not only at the faculty on Slovenian level. I'm constantly called a female dean for that reason. Which I proudly take on myself. But this particular discussion, this intervention into language, which is very patriarchal, a lot of hidden norms which are part of a certain culture, right, opened up really a lot of issues, and it wasn't easy to go through that. And still nowadays, when I'm looking every morning, I go through clipping, and still, 2 years later, there are articles that mention that here and there. So it wasn't easy to go through that for all of us, I guess. But it was, I think it was, it opened up a lot of questions, and it opened up a sense of understanding that these gender equality efforts are very much needed, and that what we are usually, faced with some kind of gender fatigue, gender equality fatigue. It's already reached, and what else do you want? I think this particular debate, this particular intervention into language, very much showed that the story is not yet ended, and I think it will never be, because the struggle for equality, not only gender equality, equality in terms of all minority groups, I think will never be ended. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That is a touching story, and you sketch us how your involvement with gender equality has both professional and private roots. You were, as you say, raised by feminist scholars in the field of sociology. You became aware of the issue professionally, also involved in European projects, but also your being part of the gay movement made you aware of this issue, how present it is in society and in daily life. One of the challenges you face is the global anti-gender movement, attacks on gender studies. And another issue is language and how to explain to a broader audience that the way we frame things has a meaning and has a hierarchy in it. And you've been brave in university to, backed up by the professional background and the professional work going on in your institution, by turning around this hierarchy, and so actually provoking a lot of debate, and you still face that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We move to the final leader speaking today, and then after that we will have a 5 minutes break and then continue to roundabout. And that is Mário Vale. Mário, can you tell us how you became involved with the issue of gender equality?
Good morning to everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for the invitation. Well, I share a lot of what has been said so far. So we also have a trajectory, and I think my trajectory and the way I start to be involved on and interested in these gender studies and the gender topic, I think it's a combination of particular and professional interests. Things mingle a little bit. Well, first I have to say that my wife, she's a gender activist, so I have a few shelves here with lots of books on gender, and naturally this is a topic, a current topic of our talks. I also have to say that I am a geographer, economic geographer one, and in our department, colleague Isabel André, she wrote the first PhD thesis on gender. It was a little bit of not shocking, but it really make some waves there, these theses, and so certainly since the beginning of the 90s, gender has been a topic on our conversations. And professionally, I would say that the first time that we need really to take this seriously was on a big FP6 project, full of geographers and economists, some hardline economists. Very difficult to tackle this gender, but European Commission demands certain gender approaches on innovation. So we really need to, we were lost a bit on this, and so we need to, and we have a great input from British colleagues on gender studies, and we also take this seriously during the project. So, and since then, I think that basically I've been collaborating, as an example, on this G-Ring Roles project, or EA grants project on mobility, gender mobility. So I've been even writing a little bit, collaborating in writing on gender perspectives on my topic. So that's the way I became interested on this. And so today I'm talking and sharing with you my views as basically 6 years of managing a big research center at University of Lisbon. It's the Center of Geographical Studies. And I think we particularly have a challenge, an important one on research, and that is the women leadership on research projects. Not saying that they are not leading, there are some good examples, as this G-Ring Rose, it's my colleague Lucinda Fonseca, she's coordinating our team, but in general, if you look to the list, especially if we talk about research contracts, basically women are underrepresented on these leading research projects. Why? Well, first, I think it's difficult to explain, but of course there are cultural aspects. Part of these research contracts are to inform public policy, and in many ways this is an old boys network, so you need to be quite informal contacts, after hours discussions. So this typical ecosystem atmosphere is not particularly favorable not even for certain men, but in general it's harder for women due to work-life balance issues. I think that's one point. And so what we think is that we might say that, well, that's not a big issue, but it is, because when you try to get a promotion on your career, you are also assessed on the way you interact with the public policy, the projects you have coordinated, and so in the end, these have some weight on the decisions that academia consider, and so we decided to kind of raise the issue first. Secondly, we tried to give some support and involvement to our colleagues. Basically, we tried to use some examples or teaming up with colleagues and introduce persons to this area of leadership, research leadership, and it's a long way, I think, but we are trying to it's not a question of regulations, it's more about practices, discourses, actions, and you know, these things change slower than making regulations, you know, in a way. So sometimes you have regulations, but you simply don't apply it, or you think you are applying it, but you have a certain view on how to apply it, as discussed before. So I think this is a challenge for our research center, and that's a long way to do. I think the recent plan on gender equal plan at our research center and the institution he got, I think it's a very good example, and I think it puts us on the right track, hopefully, and eventually. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mário. You sketch us also a context of personal and professional involvement. Personal involvement being married to a gender activist, that's always a prey, I would say. And professionally by learning from your colleague who wrote her PhD about gender and geography, and also working in European projects, FP6 projects, and then on gender and geography, and then writing together with others project proposals on the issue. One of the issues you face in the institution, the challenges, is the underrepresentation of women in, I would say, in contracts, in research contracts. So they are leading, but they are not the formal ones that sign the contracts. And that is a disadvantage in career mobility of women. And as you say, yeah, what helps you to address it, I would translate it even as patience and just the handwork of the administration. So trying to change the practices, the discourses, just taking actions. Of course, you are also very happy with the policies, with the gender equality plan that has just been adopted, but you're very aware that you just have to implement it and keep on going. Thank you very much. I propose to all the speakers and the audience that we have 5 minutes.
Inge, I'm really sorry to intervene. The roundtable officially ends at 12:30, so can we skip the break if it's okay for everyone?
12:30, is it ending in 7 minutes?
Yes.
Okay, misunderstanding from my side. In that case, we skip the break. I thought we had half an hour more. My apologies. Then I would say that the last 7 minutes are for the audience. And I will ask Leire what questions came up from the audience.
We don't have any questions at the moment, but if you can write your questions on chat, I'll be happy to read them to Inge.
Yeah, and you can also write them in English, but...
You can write in English or Turkish.
Yeah. Was there any of the leaders that already has a question to start with to one of the colleagues?
Sorry, are you asking us whether we got questions, Inge?
Yeah.
Something in the research that was presented, and I'm interested to know what other. Well, I see there is a question coming up, perhaps. Anyway, it was about the imposter syndrome, that women might deselect themselves for going into leadership roles. I like also to hear from the other colleagues and possibly members of the audience, where personally I've encountered also another issue, which I must say I did it myself. There is a perception that some of these jobs are very demanding. They take you away from being with the students, being the interesting things, that you become too detached, you spend all your time in committees, which is not actually the case. The case is that, yeah, you spend a lot of time in committees, but you can also make a difference. So people deselect themselves. Is that something that other colleagues have found? Or
Yeah, so the question is like being part of a committee in your experience makes a difference, and is it recognized by the other colleagues? And then our 2 more questions. I think Roman wants to react.
I'm just wondering if I understood the question correctly. So the question is how people deselect themselves, don't want to be part of the management boards and other groups which work more than or additionally to our research and other work at the university. Well, my experience, personal experience, is just yes, I have seen that, but I've seen it in a reversed way. I had troubles finding a male dean. I have 4 vice deans, and I decided initially that it will be split gender-wise. Now I have 3 female vice deans and 1 male vice dean, because I couldn't find the male one. Nobody wanted to work more. So, but maybe that's specific for our institution. Yeah.
Thank you, Roman. Several questions come up. Is that okay? I summarize, Leire, about meritocracy. Maria Silvestro asked how to modify the criteria of meritocracy, and Maria Lopez asked, how do you think this can be solved, this meritocracy issue? Can initiatives such as DORA, the DORA Declaration, help to overcome it? Who would like to answer? Yeah.
Happy to go. Yes, thank you for the question. It is it's not easy, but I think a good point where to start is also being part of committees, or not necessarily working groups, and encourage people to look at some of the criteria, some of the policies much more in depth, and think, how is actually this impacting? Is it impacting in a different ways on men and women, or people with particular responsibilities? So trying to encourage them to do that unpacking of all those stereotypes that often are in this part of these policies, these criteria that are being constructed in a way which is quite gendered. So it's this unpacking exercise. It's not an easy one. That's why I like the positive action, because a positive action where you have to, it forces you, where you have to make a judgment whether people are of equal merit, which doesn't mean that they are equal, they're identical, their CVs are identical, but whether what value do we attach to certain achievements, and is trying to get people into that, doing that kind of reasoning, and through that unpacking those stereotypes, which we don't even see them anymore. That's why we say, oh, it's gender neutral. It is not. So that exercise, and there are many, take any opportunities, committees, working groups, or any other opportunity to try to encourage people to start doing that unpacking and reflection.
Sorry, can I have a reaction to this? I just, just have a question. These positive actions are quite, it's like positive discrimination. It is often, again, interpreted as something additional rights for specific groups or for specific people, right? So how do you go against that? How do you react to those people who are equality fatigue, so fed up with the equality, and believe that affirmative actions or positive discrimination is nothing else than giving, additional rights, more opportunities to some people and not others?
Maybe one of the other speakers, Eduardo.
Yeah, no, I wanted to add on this particular point, which I think is very relevant in terms of more, let's say, more strategical terms. I agree, probably it's not good to talk about additional rights, but to insist on the equality principle, on material equality. So it's not giving additional rights to particular groups, but to give the groups the opportunity to have or to enjoy the same rights at the same level of the majority of groups who are in power, groups who have traditionally ruled. So I think that the best strategy is to insist on equality, that is to achieve equality, to put everybody on the same foot, and not on additional rights, because as you said, this is language which is not very well received in many sectors.
So Eduardo, if I summarize you, it is redefining equality as equality of outcome rather than equality of process. And then you stick within the equality terminology. Okay, what I propose now is I ask you one question and I give every one of you the time to give a very short reaction, and then we close the session. Mieke Verloo, my dear colleague from Nijmegen, asks every leader if you can say something about who are your major allies within your institution or your university. So I just give every one of you the floor, and then we will close the session. And on my screen, Mário Vale is the first to react.
Yeah, major allies are difficult to say. I think that in our institution, I think it's more like a group that is forming in the institution, and we think that it's more like a coalition that we are trying to create. And just to give you an example, we elect indirectly, but we elect the dean of the university, and in one of the groups that are thinking about the elections next year, in this group we openly discussed that it should be a woman leading the university now. So it's not difficult. It's now very difficult to find one that is available for such an immense task. But it's more like a collective conscience, and we are trying to form these bigger coalitions across faculties. So it's a big challenge anyway.
Thank you. Your major ally is a coalition that you are forming across faculties, and that is thinking ahead with you. Yeah,
exactly.
I might say.
Yeah, Fuat Keyman, please.
Yes,
the floor is yours.
Yes, I think you know, in terms of the question of allies, we should actually establish connections. We should create allies instead of you know, looking for them. And in my experience and in my university, I think establishing well-functioning centers, research centers, making the university more research-oriented and applying to you know, European grants and other type of grants, establishing you know, collaborations with other think tanks in all the world, other universities. These are actually extremely important to increase the awareness about gender equality, but at the same time to actually make the members of the community to implement and internalize, more importantly, you know, gender equality is a you know, sort of a very important value-added dimension of the success of the institution, and that's what we've been actually doing in our university. And I pay really attention to the importance of international offices in the universities to push these you know, European global collaborations, not only the West, but you know, the rest of the world. The more global, the more collaborative the functioning of the university is, the more awareness is possible in terms of not only gender, but all kinds of equalities, and making the institutions more open and inclusive.
Thank you very much. And that is very coherent with the story that you already told us. So allies are research institutions, both within the institution to give credit, to show the knowledge on the issue, but also international research cooperations with the West, but also the East and the South, and emphasizing the importance of knowledge development. Thank you very much. Simonetta, what are your most important allies?
We got now we got a really good gender balanced executive team at the top level of the university, which hasn't achieved overnight, but it's good. As I said before, it's part of that evolution. It's really important that the people at the top table understand about these issues, care about these issues, and in terms of it's an ongoing process developing allies, because also universities have major cultures, subcultures in departments at the departmental level. So is gaining allied at different levels. The final things I want to say, as well as the ally, you really need to get the buy-in from those who are not necessarily your natural allied. So trying to get them, those on board is one of the most important things.
Thank you very much. Building coalitions and working together with the executive board and the ones that are not like already on board, you want to get them on board.
Absolutely, the non-converted. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Eduardo, your major allies.
Well, I would mention, on the one hand, public institutions, in the sense that, they enact legislation, they ask when we apply for research for some principles and guidelines, they establish that they must be followed, so they make people aware of the importance also of introducing this perspective in research, for instance. But also, I would like also to mention the students. I mean, the new generations coming to the universities. I would like to think of them as allies. Not always, probably not 100%, but I think the new generations must help us in transforming this reality, and I think they are doing it. So I would consider them to be our allies.
Yeah, that's a great answer as well. So not only your colleagues being like experts on the issue and having organizational responsibilities, but the future generation and involving them in the discussion as well to build support and legitimacy. Thank you very much. Then I move to Karin. What are your major allies?
My major allies are, of course, my colleagues, but Eduardo took my words. I also thought about the new generation of young researchers, and in Estonia, we have Estonian Young Researchers Academy, and they are very active. And we really need, in order to make change, good spokespersons who will talk about those issues and about the importance, and then we can make a change.
Thank you very much. So your colleagues as well, but also the new generation of researchers in the whole country and involving them in this conversation. Thank you. And then we end, last but not least, with Roman, your major allies.
I cannot say that either young or old or male or female. I would say that those who either professionally or personally are sensitive to these issues for whatever reason. And of course, what really helps in these situations are also top-down policies from EU level, which are not necessarily, well accepted, but they provide a framework. So the fact that for the Europe Horizon research project, the institution will have to have a gender equality plan. That particular piece of information really helped pushing through our gender equality plan. So it's the combination of both. So the legal framework, the hard policies, and of course people with their own views and experiences.
Thank you very much, Roman. So also a very pragmatic approach. Everyone who is involved in the issue is sensitive to it and also the legal framework, the grant providers like the European Commission. Thank you very much, organizing team at Sabancı University.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, researchers from Deusto University, for introducing this discussion. Thank you very much, leaders participating in this discussion and being open about your involvement and strategies. And thank you so much, audience, for being here and being patient with us, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
We will see you all at
Thank you. Bye.
1 p.m. Istanbul time for our next session. Thank you.
Thank you.